What up, everybody? Colt Nerdy Core, back with another video, and this one's going to be another top 10 video. This one, I'm going to be covering one of my favorite consoles of all time, if not probably my favorite console of all time, the PS3. I originally made a PS4 one a while back, I think the first year of my channel, and I realized I never covered my favorite console of all time in terms of making a top 10 video, so I decided now would be the perfect time to make this video. Before I jump into the video, I'd just like to give thanks for everybody who's been subscribing recently and subscribed throughout my whole lifespan of my channel. I finally reached 1,000 subs, which was a big goal of mine, and I really appreciate anybody who subbed to the channel. Even comment, likes, and just watching the videos in general really help the channel growth and get more people in the community and more people involved in like the comments and stuff like that. And since knowing that most of my views and most people turn into my PS3 videos, I decided now would be the perfect time to knock out this PS3 top 10 and give you my take on what I think the best 10 PS3 games I've ever played for the console. I know this will vary a lot between person and person because there's certain games people have played that I haven't played, or there's just certain tastes that change with each person's opinion. So this is specifically just my top 10, so let me know your top 10 in the comments. It'll also give other people in the comments more games to check out if they haven't heard of them. And if you stick around for the end of the video, I will be going over kind of my video outline for what I plan to do for the next couple of videos. So if you're interested in that, at the end I'll be discussing that. But I'll get into the video right now. And just a little heads up of how I'll be structuring the video. First, I'll just talk a little bit about the main story for those people who haven't heard of these games before or don't know too much about the story. Then I'll touch on why I think it's a good game, the positives and negatives of the game, and kind of my personal opinion and experience with the game after that. Alright, so first up is The Last of Us. I know I'm holding up a PS4 game, but The Last of Us originally came out on the PS3. I don't own that copy. I own the PS4, whatever, remaster of it. But I still classify it as a PS3 game. This is a game that, for a lot of you PS3 collectors out there, is kind of like the one of the main staple games that is said to everybody should have in their collection. I kind of missed playing through it on the PS3, but I picked it up on the PS4 and really enjoyed it. A lot of people have this as one of the greatest, if not the best, exclusive for the console, and I can really see that. A lot of people even have it on their number one out of their top 10s, just in general. So, for those of you who don't know anything about this game, you basically play as Joel, and you have like a sidekick, Ellie. Basically, you're a duo trying to survive this giant zombie apocalypse or plague or apocalypse that turns people into basically zombies. There's also different looters and different factions you run into, and part of it's all about trying to find a cure, part of it's all about trying to survive, and part of it's all about getting revenge. So it's kind of all crumbled into this one big story. It's a game that I don't really want to give away too much about because the story and the character development is what really sets this game apart from other games. If you really took the story and character elements out of this, it would just be a solid cover shooter, a third-person shooter, with some pretty decent stealth mechanics. What really makes this game so different compared to other third-person shooters and stealth games on the console is the atmosphere and the character development that goes on during this game. Definitely you'll be playing this game to experience the story and the growth of both Joel and Ellie while going through this universe and coming into different obstacles in their way that force them to change and develop their relationship even further in terms of like kind of like a father-daughter relationship kind of thing. And it really is interesting watching them grow. And it's one of those games that makes it seem more like a genuine connection between the characters, not just a over-exaggerated version of relationships that sometimes video games portray. So definitely a great game. I think it's the second best exclusive on the console. And for those of you who haven't played it, highly recommend picking it up. But if you're a PS3 collector, you probably have already played it. Alright, next up is a game that, for those of you who watch the channel and have watched most of my videos, will probably not expect because I rag on the third one so much. And that is Borderlands 2. For me, Borderlands, I'm actually a huge fan of. The recent one, I rag on it a lot. I don't think it's a good game, but that doesn't take away from anything that the previous games have already established. And to me, personally, Borderlands 2 stands out above the pre-sequel and the first one. I kind of always flip-flop between the first one and the second one because I think there's some things the first one does a lot better than the second one, and some things the second one does a lot better than the first one. Just at the time of making this video, I'm leaning towards the second one more so. So what Borderlands is, for those of you who've heard of it but never actually experienced it or really know exactly what it's about, you basically play as a group of vault hunters that are sent to discover ancient vaults that have like alien technology in it, and to deal with the main bad guy in this game, which is Handsome Jack. He's like I don't know, I'm gonna say businessman, but a very corrupt businessman who runs this corporation, and you're trying to race against him to get to the vault and find the alien technology before him. And actually, he's one of the main reasons this game kind of gets the nod for me at the moment. This is one of those games that really is heavily carried by the bad guy in this game, or the antagonist. Handsome Jack really is one of the more entertaining bad guys I've played against in a video game. He really is the comedy of this game, honestly. This game kind of mixes comedy with serious tones in it, and Handsome Jack provides more of the comedy element to it and does it really well. All really well voice acted, and the story in this game is actually very good compared to the other games where it's kind of lackluster. But if you're not talking about the story, the main thing you're talking about in this game is the gunplay and the looting mechanics. So Borderlands 2 is a first-person shooter and really focuses heavy on the looting. So it's an RPG in the sense that you have your character, you pick out of one of 4 classes. If you have the complete edition, I think there's 6. And you level them up based on these skill trees that you can assign points to. And you go around collecting weapons. You can grind mini bosses to get different specialty weapons that only they drop. And you make your way through the story while doing a bunch of fun side quests along the way. This is definitely one of those games that if you're huge into action games, really enjoy first-person shooting, or even just into RPGs, you'll enjoy that all those mechanics really combine together to make a really well-rounded experience. And some of the gunplay in this game is some of the best on the console, and it really just feels smooth. And the art style in this game is really unique and interesting in its own way. They kind of went for a more self-shaded style, and it really suits the game really well. It kind of feels like you're almost playing a cartoon or something along that lines, and with it being more of a comedy shooter, in terms of the story and side characters, it really adds to the whole universe of the Borderlands series. Overall, I had a ton of fun playing this game. I've played it almost through twice, I think, and really it's one of those games that you can always go back and play through. It even has great couch co-op if you're into co-op, so this is definitely a game I could recommend for a ton of people. Alright, coming at number 8 is, in my opinion, the best exclusive for the PS3. I know this one won't be the most popular opinion on my take on the console, but in my opinion, it's just my favorite, and that is Infamous 2. I think the Infamous series kind of is one of those ones that it gets a nod, as in like it's a fun playthrough, but doesn't actually get the recognition it deserves compared to a lot of the other exclusives on the console. In my opinion, the Infamous series is one of the better exclusives to come out of the PS3 and PS4 era of consoles, with every single game getting better and better as the series goes on. And this one in particular, the story, you play as Cole McGrath. It's a continuation of the first game. The reason why the first game isn't on here and the second one is, they upgraded a lot of the combat mechanics and the world map and traversal mechanics, making the game just flow a lot smoother and just feel a lot better as you're playing through it. To get back to the story, Cole McGrath is basically, I think he was a courier or a delivery person or something like that. Basically, a seismic like explosion went off by him, and he basically absorbed these powers, becoming a conduit for these powers. He basically becomes a superhuman with the ability to control lightning and have regeneration in his body well beyond the norms of a regular human. This brings about envy and fear from the humans that don't have these powers, and they've kind of set these teams up to track down and contain and get rid of the conduit. What makes this game so compelling to me in terms of playing through it, it's one of those games where there's clearly a need for a second playthrough and really gives you that replayability that a lot of games lack. There's a good and evil system in this game, and your choices and what you choose to do in terms of side quests and interaction with civilians while you're traversing the world will either get up your good karma or your bad karma, which will directly change Cole in terms of his appearances, the abilities that he gets, and how his demeanor is towards people in the story. And what this game does great is a lot of the choices aren't really cut and dry in terms of if they're evil or not. It's more of how they impact general society compared to just benefiting Cole himself. While the story is great of this game, I think the main shining focus of this game and what really elevates it to me compared to a lot of other games on the console is the combat. The Infamous series has created one of my favorite combats systems in any game out there. It's basically a mix of third-person shooting with the powers, with a bunch of different abilities. You can get like rockets, you can get like single firing ones, you get ones that burst out these giant shields that prevent enemy damage and also push enemies forward. You can do melee abilities with, he has like this, I think it's like electrical rod from like a tower that he can charge his electricity into. There's basically what I'm saying, there's a bunch of different abilities and different ways the combat is utilized in this game to give a variety of different play styles, even within a third-person hack and slash third-person shooter game. There's just a big variety. Overall, I would say this is my favorite exclusive for the console. There's some close behind it, which I'll talk about later, but for me, this is the best exclusive on the console. Alright, so coming at number 7 is Batman Arkham Asylum. This, in my opinion, still holds up to be the best superhero game ever made. I know a lot of people have been enjoying the new Spider-Man games. I personally like them. I just don't think they're as good as the Batman games in my opinion, and Arkham Asylum being my favorite out of the series. So in this game particularly, you're playing as Batman. He just recently brought in the Joker to Arkham Asylum, but he's kind of surrendered out of his own will, and it's kind of strange on what's going on. Early in the game, he escapes, takes over the asylum, and you're kind of working with the kind of survivors left at the asylum to slowly cage in and get rid of all these supervillains that Batman has put away before. What makes these games so great is kind of the dark atmosphere this game goes for. It's one of the first games, I think the first game, that really captures the meaning of the superhero and kind of the correct themes and art style for the character itself. Batman has always been a dark and gritty kind of superhero, where he's more of an anti-hero that works against the police but is a vigilante for justice. And this game gets it really well with its very dark lighting choices. It's a dark story in terms of what actually happens, and a lot of the characters and bad guys really come off as how they would be pictured in like the comics or something like that. Another thing this game does really well in terms of its story is interacting with a lot of the most famous Batman supervillains in kind of the universe. My favorite personally in this game being the Scarecrow boss fight. I think they get his character done really well and really create a unique scenario specifically for Scarecrow. And I think that's one thing this game does really well, is for each supervillain you encounter, there's a different section, different area, and it kind of really ties into the theme of the character, making each chapter feel really unique. In terms of gameplay, there's two main portions. First is the fighting, which is kind of a third-person beat-em-up, where it's kind of, you do a bunch of combos, there's counter buttons, there's buttons where you can go over people, and it kind of is a bunch of really zooped up abilities all combo together to make these huge strings of combos where you're trying to not get hit and you do insane damage. It can take out groups of people, and it's just very satisfying to play. The other gameplay mechanics is the stealth mechanics in this game, which I actually think are very good. Basically, it's kind of the crawl around in vents, or uses batarang to swing up onto gargoyles or certain things in the rafters and kind of take down enemies from above. If you play the Spider-Man games that are recent but haven't played the Arkham games, the Spider-Man fighting mechanics and stealth mechanics are blatantly ripped off and taken from the Arkham games. So if you love those games, you would enjoy these games just as much. So overall, amazing game on the console. I think it's better than City and Origins just from the story and the characters that you run into. Also, I like the more linear pathing approach to the game. I think it keeps the pacing of the game a lot better than other games. But some people prefer the other games, and I could definitely see why. Just my personal take. Alright, coming at number 6 is probably, in my opinion, one of the best shooting franchises of all times in terms of first-person shooter, and that is Bioshock. So what Bioshock is story-wise, it's basically your plane crash and you land in a underground city called Rapture. And the game starts off with you figuring out that there's a bunch of like mutated versions of humans walking around there, and a bunch of different monsters that were created due to a bunch of issues you undiscover later in the story, which are kind of big spoilers, so I won't mention. In my opinion, one of the things this game does best is its story itself. I think the atmosphere this game creates is unlike any other, and I think if I was to recommend a game just based on the atmosphere and mood that the game creates, I would recommend Bioshock. The whole mix of kind of the Fallout-ish vibes you get with kind of the old school music and old school art style in terms of the building structures, mixed with the futuristic ability powers you get, the weapons, and kind of the automated and automation of the city itself, really clash together well and make a really cool atmosphere. And the story in this game is amazing. The story throughout the whole thing will keep your attention. You run into some really cool side characters that are kind of nuts, but help you in certain ways. There's certain choices that you can make that affect the story near the end and going into other games. And the ending of this game, I think, is one of the best twists in any video game I've played, and also has a very satisfying ending. With the story taken out of it, it's still a very solid first-person shooter. What I would describe this game as, it's basically a first-person shooter, kind of where you have to watch your ammo in terms of kind of it being a survival horror game. It's not too heavy on the having to watch your ammo, but if you just spray and pray all the time, you'll run into issues with finding ammo and using your resources correctly. The other thing this game offers is powers. So basically on one hand, you'll have your gun, one hand you'll have a power of sorts, and all of them are upgradable. So you can choose to upgrade your guns, you can choose which guns, which specific upgrades you want for your gun, which will very heavily influence what your play style is through this game. Also, a lot of combos can be made between powers and your guns or weapons, or powers in general, combining multiple powers to create bigger versions of your powers. Overall, this game is just a great time to play. Really, if you're into kind of the horror-ish genre or shooters in general and you don't mind the horror aspect, this game is one I could highly recommend. And reason why it's in my top 10 is I just had such a good experience playing this game, and this is one of those games that when I started it, I had to complete it all the way through before touching anything else, just because I was so hooked into the environment and atmosphere this game creates that I wanted to see it all the way through. Alright, coming in at number 5 is probably one of the more famous games I'll be talking about today. A lot of the games I'm talking about are famous, but this one in particular gets a lot of recognition, especially with the PC community, and that is Fallout New Vegas. In my opinion, this is the best Fallout game. I know a lot of people like Fallout 3, but I think New Vegas just has a certain charm, and I think does certain things better than 3 that really grab my attention more than other Fallout games. For those of you who haven't heard of the Fallout games, or have never played one yourself, in this game in particular, you're playing as a courier. You were basically assigned to curry something for, I think it's a gangster named Benny, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a while since I've played through this game. But basically you get shot in the head, betrayed, and then the whole main starting goal is to find out where Benny is and get revenge. But on the way, which a lot of these Fallout games and Bethesda games do, like combine a bunch of main stories together in this giant universe and give you a bunch of choices on how to impact so many different main campaign stories that all combine together at the end to kind of give you a big finale of all your choices combined. In terms of story, this game is one of those games that just requires exploration. So you have to go around to different towns, different outposts, different factions, and just talk to people. You'll get so many different quests that lead to so many different quest lines. One of my favorite being, I think they're called the White Glove Society in Vegas, where you're trying to find this dude's missing son, and it turns out to go way left. That's one of my favorite stories personally in this game. But in this game, it's really about exploration and finding stories. What these early Bethesda games do so well is create the environment of the Fallout series, which is a lot of old school music, old school architecture, mixed with the futuristic weapons, kind of like what I was saying with Bioshock, but in my opinion, they do it better. The combat in this game is kind of just a standard first-person shooter. There's also melee mechanics. The thing that makes this game so great is there's so much you can do in terms of RPG mechanics. Unlike the new Fallout game, A lot of the stat choices you make in the beginning and while leveling up, I think there's like 15 or something different categories you can level up, from sciences to medical to explosions to enhancements in certain guns, and also your speech, all depend and interact with your choices in terms of chat options. If you have certain levels, you can take different story options in terms of talking to people. Also, different opportunities will open up in terms of if you have a high security level and science level, you can get through certain areas that you couldn't get through. If you have explosive experts, you can blow up stuff that you couldn't in other playthroughs. If you have high charisma and good speech, you can basically talk your way out of any situation. So there's a lot of replayability in making different characters and experiencing the game in different ways. Overall, amazing game, amazing RPG, and I would highly recommend anybody who hasn't played it or has played the Elder Scrolls or some of the other Fallout games and hasn't touched this one, highly recommend getting into it. Alright, coming at number 4, we're kind of getting to the cream of the crop for me on the console. And coming at number 4, this will be probably the most surprising, I would say, out of my choices. But for those of you who watch the channel, you would kind of know some game like this would be on the list. And that's Skate 3. I'm a huge fan of skateboarding and snowboarding games. One of my favorite genres, just to sit down, play, have some good fun, and always be able to pick up and get back into it and just have some fun. With the Tony Hawk series taking a huge nosedive during this period and during this era of consoles, there needed to be another skateboarding game that kind of filled the void of the Tony Hawk series, and that's where Skate came in. Skate is more of a simulation style of skateboarder compared to the Tony Hawk games, where you more focus on small combos, kind of mixing them into lines to create your combos, kind of like real skaters do, where it's kind of you do a trick, lead up to another trick in a certain amount of time, and that creates your combos, kind of like in Tony Hawk, where you're doing all sorts of combos together and all the tricks connect. It's kind of the same thing as that, but they're really long, drawn-out lines. Another thing this game does differently compared to the Tony Hawk games is it has the flip stick controls. So basically, your board and the tricks that you do are controlled by your analog stick, your right one. So if you want to do a nollie, you would go up and then down on the stick, and that would start with the front of the board and nollie up. Whereas if you want to do a regular trick or a flip trick, say you want to do a pop shove it, which is turning the board all the way around. In the air, you would do a half circle or full circle on the bottom, and that would do your pop shove it. So it's one of the more interactive skateboarding games in terms of the actual feeling of the board and the tricks. The story in this game, kind of just a general story. You're basically this legendary skateboarder who's been established in the first 2 games, or is it the second? It might just be the second one onto the third. But you're basically this legendary mute skateboarder who comes back and decided to create his own brand. And you go around doing basically these crazy tricks and crazy stunts, gaining brand loyalty for your skateboarding brand, while also being able to hire custom skaters for your brand, do tournaments with them, and take pictures of them for magazines. And really, you're developing this brand while just going around having fun skateboarding. In my opinion, this is one of the best. Just pick up and play, have a good time, and just have some fun games that I play on the console, and I always go back to it. That's why it's in my top 10 and really high on my top 10, because I think it's one of the better skateboarding games made. And personally, Skate 3 I think is just the most polished out of all of them. There could be an argument for 2, but in my opinion 3 takes the cake. Alright, now we're into the top 3. So these are the big cojones out of them. So first up, we got Dragon Age Origins. This is a game a lot of people know about. Some people haven't played it, but it's a very famous game. It's made by BioWare, same people who made Mass Effect, and it's an RPG, or Knights of the Old Republic if you played those. Basically, story-wise, what this game's about is you are a Grey Warden. You're basically last of kind of a... it's almost like a defender of the realms, and they're kind of there to ward off evil and kind of fight whatever bad guys come out of wherever. So basically in this game, I think they're called the Darkspawn, if I'm not mistaken. It's basically this dark energy and entity that comes out, and they're waging war and just slaughtering villages. There's also a civil war going on at the same time, and a lot of different issues arise in this game. What this game does so well, compared to other RPGs, and kind of falls in line with the Knights of the Old Republic and Mass Effect games, is that it really creates a connection between you and your squad mates. So in this game, you go around recruiting a bunch of different people onto your team. They have varying classes, so you have some of them are healers, some of them that are mages, some of them that are thieves, some people that are tanks, some people that just are two-handed damage dealers. But they all have their unique characters, development, and all have their different sides of how they view the war and what you're going through. So there's a good and bad guy system in this game, similar to the Mass Effect games, where you can choose to either become light side or dark side, and that will choose what characters more interact with you respectively, and what other ones start to shun you out and might actually leave your party based on some of your choices. And in my opinion, this is one of those games that you want to talk to everybody on your team constantly to check in on like what they have to say about certain situations, because there'll always be updates on their thoughts and feelings about certain situations, certain people you run into. They'll have history with certain characters, and certain people on your party will have conversations with each other in different sections of the game. So it's always unique, bringing different people and hearing your squad talk about whatever's going on. And it's one of those games I always go chat up the squad, do up all the dialogue options, just to hear and have more growth in the story. The combat in this game, I think, is really well done. It's very similar to the Knights of the Old Republic games on the original Xbox and I think the PS2, where it's kind of turn-based but not turn-based, in the sense that each ability is on a kind of timer to when it will actually be released from when you press it. And certain abilities are slow, certain abilities are fast. So it's about getting your abilities out before other people or saving up for your strong abilities and using your positioning to your advantage. It's actually a pretty hard game if you're playing on a harder difficulty, so it'll require a lot of strategy in terms of growing your characters and making their classes and choosing what abilities to run. Overall, just a really solid, great example of an amazing RPG. And if you're an RPG fan and haven't touched this game, I would highly recommend it. Alright, coming at number 2, I'm going to give you one hint, and you'll probably be able to get it. It is the game that is probably, besides GTA, on the most consoles at the moment, and just kind of gets ported onto whatever console comes out. And that is Skyrim. So Skyrim to me holds a special place in kind of my gaming history, I would say, for lack of a better terms, in that it is the first RPG I ever played in terms of like a serious North American RPG. I played Knights of the Old Republic a bit when I was younger, but I kind of didn't really know what was going on in terms of the RPG elements. This is the first RPG I actually sat down, played, learned the RPG mechanics. It really grew into enjoying RPGs, and then I picked up all the other RPGs I have after playing this game. So what Skyrim is, story-wise, for the like 2 people that haven't heard of this game, is basically you're a dragonborn. You're basically a ancient descendant of dragons or certain people, and you're basically, all these dragons came back and they're kind of rampaging around and kind of bringing the end times to this world. And you're the dragonborn. Your goal is to stop the dragons. And the similar to Fallout and Dragon Age and Mass Effect, all these other games I'll be talking about, these great RPGs, is the overarching story is kind of generic, but it's still engaging. And what you're playing this game for is all the other stories that encompass the world in this game and make this game so interesting. What I enjoyed so much about this game, it's similar to Oblivion, which is the other Elder Scrolls game, is there's so many different sub-stories and guilds and clans you can join that all offer their own unique story and perspective on what's going on in the world. So there's always things to do in this game, and there's so many hours of just great content in this game that makes this game really worth purchasing if you haven't. My only slight to this game is the RPG mechanics are kind of where you can be a jack of all trades. So in terms of creating replayability off of not being able to make a jack of all trades, you kind of got to limit yourself to certain classes or certain level ups just to make it more interesting when you play again, so you can play a new character and a new path in terms of your combat abilities and your abilities kind of around the world. The Legendary Edition is the only edition I would recommend for Skyrim on the PS3 because the original PS3 copy had so many issues. Mine got so bad that I couldn't even touch water every time I would touch water above my knees, like my character's knees, my entire console would freeze and I would have to restart. So if I was to recommend a copy, it would be the Legendary Edition, or just get one of the plethora of remasters that are on the newer consoles. Combat-wise, this game is basically a first-person hack and slash mixed with some shooting elements, where the magic and bows kind of equal first-person shooter. Again, this is one of those games, great RPG, where all the different combat elements feel very unique, and it adds to the game, and it's just a very solid combat experience. It's not amazing, but what you're playing for is the world building and the story elements you're playing these games for. Alright, so before we move on to my number one pick for my favorite PS3 game of all time, I want to just touch on some of the games that were really close to making this list, and I just want to give a shout out to of being some games that I would put somewhere close to my top 10. So first off, I'll go through some of the exclusives that were really close to making the top 10, just were slightly out of it. First up is Uncharted. Uncharted, amazing series. I still think the first one's the best. Still haven't played the third or fourth, so can't really hold my value on that too much. But I think the first is better than the second. I like the combat mechanics the best about these games, and the first one focuses more on combat, where the second one, there's a lot of more exploration and climbing stuff, which I don't really enjoy. But overall, fantastic series. There's no debate on why this is one of the best PlayStation exclusives to ever release. Next, I'm just going to cover these two together. They're two of the best first-person shooters in this era of games, and I think two of the best on the console itself, and that's Killzone 2 and Resistance. I would highly recommend all the games in these series. And next up is one of my personal favorites for one of my favorite types of games out there is arcade sports games. I think they're some of the most fun games to play out there, and Blitz League 2 is the best on the console by far in terms of non-skateboarding games, obviously with skate games. But just in general, arcade sports games, I would say this is one of the best. It's a very extreme version of football. It's based on the XFL, which is an extreme football league, and really just has amazingly cool big hits, big plays, cool campaign mode where it's like kind of RPG elements in terms of upgrading your character and your team as you go through each division, and really just a lot of fun to play through. So if you're into sports games at all, it's kind of pricey now, but if you can find it for a decent price, I highly recommend getting it. I also talk about this game on my second PS3 Hidden Gems video, so if you want a little more in-depth review on it, that will be where to find that. And then finally, Bayonetta. This is the game that got me into third-person beat-em-up games. I wasn't a huge fan of them before this game. I tried to get into God of War and some of the other ones. I don't know if it was just because I was younger and didn't really enjoy that type of game at the time. I was kind of really engrossed with shooters and anything Star Wars. But after picking up Bayonetta, I really got into the flow of the game. The combat's very stylish, very fast-paced. The dodging mechanics and kind of the witch time where she slows down time is really fun and really enjoying, and feels great when you hit it. And fighting these really cool bosses that change and are very unique in how they fight is awesome through this game. There's so many different upgrades, like her herself, her abilities, and her weapons, that it gives you a lot of choices and replayability galore. So if you're into beat 'em up games at all, highly recommend getting Bayonetta if you haven't gotten into it. In my opinion, the second one's the best out of the two, and I'm really hoping they announce the third one at E3, but who knows. Alright, finally we got my number one PS3 game of all time. I've kind of hinted at it by mentioning it through other games I've talked about, and that is Mass Effect. Specifically, Mass Effect 2. I only have the trilogy, so I couldn't hold up like just two, but it's the middle one. What these games are, I think, are one of the best trilogies of games I've ever played. It's basically a giant sci-fi story that continues on seamlessly from game to game to game, with all your choices through the series mattering all the way up till like 3/4 of the way through the last game. The ending in the third game's awful. I won't want to touch on that. It's a sore spot. But all that leading up is amazing, especially the seamless transition from the first game all the way through the second game. There's so many different aspects of the story and characters that you interact with from other games. It's a game where choices really matter and really change how the story's going to interact, how your characters are going to interact with you in terms of your squad, and how your character is shaped on its view of the galaxy. Basically, everything I said for Dragon Age in terms of you wanting to talk to all the people in your squad. You have this squad of so many different characters that all have different beliefs on what's going on in the galaxy, and all these different little story elements you run into. They all have different takes on them, and you want to talk to all of them. Amplify that by 3. This game, every single character is so unique, so different. There's not a character I hate in this game. They're all really unique in their own way, and throughout the entire series, it's great to see the character growth of all the characters through the games, and if you can keep them alive throughout the whole game, seeing their stories all come to a close through all 3 games is really great to see. Also, a lot of even the sub characters, so if you're playing like a submission and you save a person, later on through the games, either if you save them on 1, it might not be till 3, but you'll interact with them again and they'll send you help or send you a message saying thanks and updating on you on what they're doing. So the choices you make through this game, even little ones, impact the story in a big way. The only thing I will say about these games is the third one, the ending's absolutely horrible, and it's because EA rushed BioWare to put it out, and that's a whole nother rant video. You could see so many rant videos online of people talking about that. But Mass Effect 2, in my opinion, is the best game out of the series. The reason for this is, 1, I think it has the most interesting squad out of all of the games, because the characters kind of go in and out of being directly on your squads or characters you just meet throughout the game again. I also think the story and the combat are the best in 2. The bad guy is very interesting. The story from beginning to end is interesting. There's a lot of mystery and twists. And I think learning about each of your characters in your squad is the best in that game, because there's loyalty missions for all of them. So they all have their unique missions that you gotta go complete, which opens up so many new information doors about each of all the characters. So it really gives you a new viewpoint and more in-depth knowledge about each of your characters. Also, a lot of your choices affect really heavily on the end in terms of like, have you been upgrading correctly? Have you been doing your loyalty missions? Will choose and basically impact how many people of your squad actually live through the game. So there's a lot of impact on your choices throughout this entire game. Overall, it's just the most complete out of the game, and the combat is the best. The combat's probably the best in 3. I think it's the most refined. But in 2, it takes such a huge leap from the first game that 2, in my opinion, is the greatest of the wholes. Best story, best impact from other games, and really solid combat. So if I was going to recommend one game out of all my PS3 games that everybody needs to play, it's the Mass Effect series, specifically 2. Alright, so that wraps up my video on my top 10 PS3 games of all time. Definitely, as I said before the video, recommend your top 10 games and list your top 10 games below in the comments. It helps me and other people see other games to look into and other games that are highly coveted by certain people to look into and maybe play eventually for the PS3. Also, it's just interesting to see how different people's opinions and views on different games are shaped for different reasons. So just to touch on what I was saying before with my kind of video schedule I'm kind of working with here. So I'm going to make my next video on E3. So I'm going to watch all the E3 and kind of do a full coverage video on all the important stuff from E3 and kind of talk about the games that most interest me and kind of cover all the games that have been announced in the upcoming E3, hopefully Bayonetta 3. But that will be probably my next video. Then a little later on in the year, I want to start the video series I was planning to do for the 1,000 subscriber kind of mark. And that is, I'm going to do my top 100 games of all time. I'll probably break it up into like 6 videos where I go 20 at a time till the top 20, where I'll do 10 games in each and give more of an in-depth opinion on those 10 games. The reason why I think this would be so interesting, because some of the more popular videos on my channel are my hidden gem videos and my top 10 videos. So if I can combine that, and where a top 100 games would cover a lot of hidden gems, because I have such a different take on what games I like compared to other people, because everybody has different opinions on certain games. So you'd find a lot of hidden gems mixed in with a lot of triple A, like really beloved games. So it'd be a nice combination of both those types of videos into one giant series. So definitely let me know if that's a video that interests you. I'll also be planning on doing my PS3 collection video probably sometime in September, November. For those of you who've been asking about that, it will definitely be coming. I don't know about a PS4 one this year. I'll probably do that the following year, but definitely a PS3 one you can look forward to. So overall, thanks for watching. Again, really appreciate the 1,000 subscribers and the continuing support on the channel. And make sure to leave comments on my videos. I love responding to people, and I always try to respond. So yeah, thanks for watching, and remember, everybody has some nerdiness at their core.